Tell your manager I do not tolerate disrespect.
سيدي، قبل أن تغادر، اسمح لي أن أشرح لك ما لم يخبروك به. أنت شجاعي جداً.
أنت شجاعي جداً.
A man worth over $30 billion, a titan of industry, whose whisper could shake stock markets, was on his feet. His voice, a low thunder that silenced one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. Sheikh Khalid Al-Jamil was leaving, and he was taking the restaurant's Michelin stars with him in the form of a reputation shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. His aides were scrambling, the manager was pale with terror, and the entire room was frozen, all because of a simple mistake. But as he spat a final venomous curse in his native tongue, he was stopped dead. Not by a security guard, not by the manager, but by a 24-year-old waitress named Maya, whose quiet 5-word response in perfect dialectal Arabic would unravel a story of tragedy, destiny, and a debt that reached across decades. The air in Ethelgard wasn't just air, it was a carefully curated atmosphere. At $3,000 a plate for the tasting menu, guests didn't just pay for food, they paid for the privilege of breathing rarefied oxygen, scented with white truffle old money and profound exclusivity. For the staff, that air was thick with suffocating pressure. For Maya Williams, it was the price of survival. Every night, Maya donned the restaurant's severe charcoal grey uniform, a modern tunic that felt more like armor. She'd tie her auburn hair into a bun so tight it pulled at her temples, a constant nagging reminder of the discipline required to work here. Ethelgard was a world away from the cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Queens she shared with her younger brother, Leo. It was a world away from the mounting pile of medical bills for Leo's physical therapy and the tuition statements for his community college courses. Every clink of crystal, every hushed laugh from a table draped in designer labels was a taunt and a motivator. Tonight the tension was unusually high. Mr. Davenport, the restaurant's general manager, a man whose posture was as stiff as his starched collar, had been gliding through the dining room like a nervous ghost. "Table 7 is arriving," he'd hissed during the staff briefing. "Sheikh Khalid Al-Jamil. Do I need to explain the significance?" No one needed an explanation. Khalid Al-Jamil wasn't just wealthy, he was a dynasty. His family's conglomerate, Al-Jamil Global, had its fingers in everything from telecommunications to sustainable energy. He was known for his Midas touch in business and his volcanic temper when things fell short of perfection. His patronage could elevate a restaurant to legendary status. His displeasure could wipe it off the map. "Williams," Davenport had said, his eyes locking onto Maya. "You're on his section. You're meticulous. Do not, and I mean, do not make a single mistake." Maya had simply nodded her face, an unreadable mask of professionalism. "Yes, Mr. Davenport." The sheikh arrived not with a bang, but with a chilling silence. He and his 3 associates were ushered to the best table in the house, a secluded alcove, with a panoramic view of the city lights. He was younger than Maya expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to be taking in every minute detail of his surroundings and finding them all wanting. He wore a bespoke Savile Row suit that probably cost more than Maya's annual salary, but his face was etched with a deep weariness, a tension in his jaw that no amount of luxury could erase. From the start, the meal was a tightrope walk over a canyon. The sheikh barely spoke, communicating with curt gestures and clipped remarks to his aide, a man named Fadi. Maya moved with practiced grace, a phantom anticipating needs before they were voiced. She presented the amuse-bouche, explaining the delicate balance of the Osetra caviar and the crème fraîche foam with a quiet confidence. The sheikh waved a dismissive hand before she was halfway through, already deep in a hushed but clearly heated discussion in Arabic with his companions. The first crack appeared with the water. The sheikh had requested Qatari bottled sidra, a specific niche brand. A busboy, a new hire named Ben, who was trembling like a leaf, had mistakenly brought a bottle of Norwegian Voss. Sheikh Khalid stopped mid-sentence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He simply stared at the bottle on the table as if it were a poisonous snake. "I specified my preference," he said, his English low and precise. The words hung in the air, each one a drop of ice. Davenport materialized instantly, his face ashen. "1,000 apologies, Your Excellency. A grievous error." He snatched the bottle away and glared daggers at Ben, who looked like he might faint. Maya stepped in smoothly. "My apologies, sir. The correct bottle is on its way." She was calm, a small island of composure in a rising sea of panic. The Sheikh's dark eyes flickered to her for the first time. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture that said, "You have one more chance." But the damage was done. The mood at the table, already sour, curdled completely. The business talk grew more agitated. Maya could pick out words from their rapid-fire Arabic contract betrayal father's legacy. It was clear his anger wasn't about the water. The restaurant and its staff had simply become the unfortunate receptacle for a fury that had been brewing long before he walked through their doors. Maya served the second course, a seared scallop with a saffron reduction. She placed the plate before the sheikh, her movements economical and silent. As she retreated, her foot caught for a microsecond on the thick pile of the carpet. She didn't stumble, not really, but her momentary hesitation was enough. The sheikh saw it. His eyes narrowed. He looked from her to the plate and then back to her. He picked up his fork, pushed the single scallop around the porcelain, and then laid the utensil down with a soft, definitive click. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the silent, deferential space around the table. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice no longer quiet. It was a controlled burn, a prelude to an inferno. "This entire experience has been a parade of incompetence." Fadi, his aide, leaned in. "Khalid, please," he murmured in Arabic. "It's just a meal." "It is not just a meal," the sheikh shot back in the same language, his voice rising. "It is a reflection of a standard they have failed to meet at every turn. It is an insult." He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping harshly against the polished floor. The entire dining room, which had been pretending not to notice, fell completely silent. Every eye was on table 7. Mr. Davenport began a brisk, panicked walk from across the room, his face a mask of horror. Sheikh Khalid al-Jamil stood to his full height. He looked down at the exquisite food, the pristine table setting, and then at Maya, who stood frozen a few feet away. "We are leaving," he announced to his companions. Then he turned his gaze on Davenport, who had just arrived, breathless. "And I will make it my personal mission to ensure that the world knows how Ethelgard treats its guests. Your reputation will be in ashes by morning." Davenport's professionally pleasant facade shattered. "Your Excellency, please, I implore you. Whatever the issue, we can rectify it. The meal is on the house, your entire evening." He was practically bowing his hands, clasped together in supplication. The sheikh let out a short, bitter laugh. "You think this is about money? You think I can be placated with a free meal?" He gestured around the opulent room. "This place is a farce. It has the shell of excellence, but the soul is hollow. It is rotten from the inside." His voice, though not a full-throated shout, carried an immense weight that commanded the attention of everyone present. Diners paused with forks halfway to their mouths. Conversations died. The only sounds were the sheikh's resonant voice and the frantic, shallow breathing of the manager. Maya stood rooted to the spot. Her training screamed at her to disappear, to become invisible, to let Davenport handle the cataclysm. but her feet felt like lead. This wasn't just a customer complaint. It was a public execution. She saw Ben, the young bus boy, cowering near the service station, his face streaked with tears. She saw the kitchen staff peering through the small window of the door, their faces grim. She felt the collective humiliation of the entire staff settling on her shoulders. Her job, Ben's job, all their jobs were hanging by the thread of this man's monumental rage. It began with carelessness. The sheikh continued, his voice rising in tempo, and it has ended with utter disrespect. He pointed a finger at the scallop now cooling on his plate. This is not passion. This is mass-produced luxury for people with more money than sense. My father would have been ashamed to dine here. The mention of his father seemed to fuel his anger, making it something deeper and more personal. The business associates were now on their feet, looking deeply uncomfortable. Fadi tried to place a calming hand on the sheikh's arm. "Khalid, let us go. This is not the place," Fadi urged quietly in Arabic. Khalid shook him off, his eyes blazing. He turned his fury back to Davenport, but his gaze swept over Maya, dismissing her as nothing more than a piece of furniture, a uniformed automaton. "You sell an illusion," he boomed, "and I have no time for illusions." He threw his linen napkin onto the table. It was a gesture of finality, of utter contempt. He turned to leave, his entourage falling in behind him, like a royal guard in retreat. The silence in the restaurant was so profound, Maya could hear the hum of the wine refrigerators from across the room. Davenport looked as if he was having a heart attack, his hand clutching at his chest. As the sheikh passed Maya's position, he didn't even look at her. He was still muttering to Fadi, his anger a hot, flowing current. He was leaving, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop him. The restaurant was doomed. Maya's job was gone. Leo's tuition, the physical therapy sessions. A kaleidoscope of impending disasters flashed through her mind. And then, just as he was about to clear the alcove, he delivered his parting shot. It was not meant for the room, but for his own people, a final, guttural expression of his disgust. He spoke in a rich Khaliji Arabic, the dialect of the Gulf, laden with weary contempt. This entire night was a waste of breath. It was a common enough phrase, but it was the way he said it, the specific cadence, the sigh of profound disappointment that resonated with something deep inside Maya. It was a sound she knew, a sound from another life, another world. Without thinking, without any conscious decision, the training and the fear and the desperation fell away, replaced by an instinct she hadn't accessed in years. Her own voice, quiet but clear, cut through the suffocating silence. She replied in the exact same dialect, her accent flawless, imbued with a world-weariness that matched his own. Her words were not an apology. They were not a plea. They were a proverb. An old Bedouin saying her father used to recite, "The patient hunter gets the gazelle." 5 simple words. But in that room, at that moment, they were a sonic boom. Sheikh Khalid al-Jamil stopped. It wasn't a gradual halt. It was a dead stop, as if he had walked into a wall of glass. His foot poised for the next step, hung in the air for a split second before planting itself firmly on the floor. His back, which had been ramrod straight with indignation, went rigid. For a full 3 seconds, he did not move, did not turn. The only thing that moved was Fadi, his aide, who nearly collided with him from behind. The silence that followed was different from the one before. The first silence had been born of shock and fear. This one was born of pure, unadulterated disbelief. Mr. Davenport, who had been on the verge of collapsing, blinked stupidly. He'd heard Maya speak, but the sounds were alien, guttural. He had no idea what she'd said, only that it had arrested the departure of the most dangerous man he'd ever encountered. Fadi and the other two associates stared at Maya, their mouths slightly agape. They understood the words, but the context was impossible. It was like watching a stray cat recite Shakespeare. It simply did not compute. Who was this girl, this American waitress with auburn hair and pale skin, speaking their dialect with the fluency of a native, quoting ancient proverbs to their enraged employer, slowly, deliberately? Sheikh Khalid turned around. He moved not with anger, but with a terrifying, controlled precision. His face was a marble mask, the fury in his eyes replaced by an intense, burning curiosity that was far more unnerving. He scanned the room, past the stunned diners, past the petrified manager, until his gaze landed and locked on Maya. She met his stare. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, a frantic rhythm against the sudden stillness of the world. What had she done? The words had just come out a ghost, from her past, speaking through her mouth. It was a suicidal, insane act. She should have stayed silent. She should have let him walk away. He took a step towards her. Then another. He moved with the predatory grace he was known for, in the boardroom, dissecting a problem, an opponent, a mystery. His associates remained behind, watching the bizarre, silent confrontation unfold. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could smell the faint, expensive scent of oud on his suit and see the flecks of gold in his dark brown eyes. The 6-foot-plus billionaire towered over her, but for the first time that night, Maya didn't feel small. She felt exposed, seen. He spoke to her in Arabic, his voice a low, dangerous murmur that was meant for her alone. "Repeat what you said." Maya swallowed the sound loud in her own ears. Her voice, when it came, was steady, betraying none of the chaos churning inside her. She repeated the proverb, her accent just as perfect, her tone just as level. Al-Sayad al-Sabr, Yanal al-Ghazal. The patient hunter gets the gazelle. He studied her face, searching for any sign of mockery, any hint that this was a party trick learned from a language app. He found none. Her gaze was direct, her expression serious. There was a history in her eyes that he was suddenly desperate to understand. "Who taught you to speak like that?" he asked, still in Arabic. "Your accent, it is not from a school, it is from the Gulf, specifically from the tribes of the Empty Quarter. Where did you learn it?" "I grew up there." Maya replied simply, the Arabic flowing from her as naturally as English. It felt strange and familiar on her tongue after so many years of disuse. "My parents were academics." A flicker of something confusion, perhaps memory, crossed his face. The rigid mask was beginning to crack. He was no longer a furious patron or a corporate titan. He was a man confronted with an impossibility. He switched back to English, his voice now devoid of its earlier venom. It was sharp, inquisitive. "Academics. What academics?" "Historians." Maya said, her chin lifting slightly. "And archaeologists. They specialized in pre-Islamic trade routes." Mr. Davenport, seeing the conversation and sensing a microscopic chance to salvage the evening, began to creep forward. "Your Excellency, if I may." The sheikh raised a single hand, not even looking at the manager. The gesture was absolute. "Stay back." Davenport froze mid-step. Khalid's attention was entirely, completely on Maya. The world had shrunk to the space between them. The bustling million-dollar restaurant, the horrified staff, the gawking patrons, they had all faded into an irrelevant blur. "I will ask you again," Sheikh Khalid said, his voice intense. "Who are you?" Before Maya could answer, he dismissed his own question with a wave of his hand. It was too public, too exposed. "Fadi!" He called over his shoulder. His aide immediately stepped forward. "Settle the bill, in full. Add a 50% gratuity for the staff's trouble." Fadi nodded, already pulling out a black credit card. "You two," he said to his other associates. "Wait for me in the car. I will be down shortly." They scurried away, relieved to be escaping the strange gravity of the scene. Davenport looked on, utterly bewildered. The sheikh was paying and tipping generously. After the scene he'd just made, the sheikh turned back to Maya. "You. We are not finished. I want to know who you are and how you came to speak a language you have no business knowing." He glanced around the now buzzing dining room. "But not here." He looked at Davenport. "Your office. Now." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Maya looked at her manager, who simply nodded, his eyes wide, with a mixture of terror and awe. Without another word, Sheikh Khalid al-Jamil turned and walked towards the back of the restaurant, expecting Maya to follow. And as she took the first step, leaving the wreckage of the dining room behind her, Maya Williams knew her life had just been irrevocably, terrifyingly, and perhaps miraculously altered forever. Mr. Davenport's office was as sterile and impersonal as the man himself. Grey walls, a glass desk, a single sad-looking orchid in the corner. It was a room designed for firing people and calculating profit margins, not for earth-shattering conversations. Sheikh Khalid stood by the large window overlooking the back alley, his hands clasped behind his back, staring down at the dumpsters and the steam rising from the vents. He looked out of place, a hawk trapped in a sparrow's cage. Maya stood near the door, her hands clenched at her sides. Mr. Davenport hovered awkwardly for a moment before the sheikh dismissed him with a flick of the wrist. "Leave us." The manager practically fled, closing the door softly behind him. The silence in the small office was thick and heavy. Finally, Khalid turned from the window. The last traces of his public fury had vanished, replaced by an unnerving calm, the quiet intensity of a predator that has cornered its prey. "Let us start again," he said, his English precise. "My name is Khalid al-Jamil, and you are—" "Maya Williams," she said. Her voice was steady, but her pulse was a frantic drum against her throat. "Maya Williams," he repeated, tasting the name. It was so incongruously American. "Tell me about your parents, Miss Williams. The historians." This was the moment to be careful to reveal just enough. "My father was Dr. Alan Williams. My mother, Dr. Evelyn Reed. They were leading experts on the frankincense road. They spent over 20 years living and working on excavation sites, primarily in the UAE and southern Saudi Arabia." As she spoke, she saw a subtle shift in his expression. The name Williams hadn't registered, but Reed seemed to strike a chord. He took a step closer, his eyes searching her face as if trying to place a long-forgotten memory. "Evelyn Reed," he murmured more to himself than to her. The woman with the bright red hair, who hated the heat, but loved the desert. Maya's breath caught in her throat. "You knew my mother." "I was a boy," he said, his voice softening with a distant, nostalgic quality. "My father, he was a great man, a man of vision. He believed our future could not be built without a deep understanding of our past. He was the primary patron for several archaeological projects in the region. He considered it his duty to preserve our heritage." He paused, his gaze fixed on her. One of those projects was the Shisar excavation. It was run by a brilliant, fiercely intelligent American couple. A man with a kind smile and a woman with hair like a desert sunset. Maya felt a wave of dizziness. Shisar. The lost city of Ubar, the place that had defined her entire childhood, the place she hadn't dared to speak of in years. My father, Khalid continued, held Dr. Williams and Dr. Reed in the highest esteem. He would take me with him to the dig site during my holidays. It was a magical place for a boy, a world of dust and discovery. I remember your mother giving me a piece of lemon candy once because I was complaining about the flies. A memory sharp and vivid pierced through the fog of years. Maya, a small girl of about 6, sitting in the shade of a canvas tent, watching a tall, important-looking man in a white thobe talking with her parents. Beside him was a boy, a little older than her, looking bored and miserable in the sweltering heat. Her mother, laughing, had walked over and handed the boy a small, yellow-wrapped candy from her pocket. "You were that boy," Maya whispered, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. He nodded slowly. "And you were the little girl with the scraped knees who was always trying to help by digging in the wrong places. The one who spoke a child's mishmash of English and the local dialect." The formal office, the tense confrontation, the city of New York itself, it all dissolved. For a moment, they were 2 children again, under the relentless Arabian sun, connected by the shared dust of a forgotten time. The furious billionaire was gone. The struggling waitress was gone. In their place were just Khalid and Maya. The shared moment of reverie shattered as the present came rushing back in. "Your parents," Khalid said, his tone shifting again, becoming serious, concerned. "They were extraordinary people. Where are they now? I assume they retired back to the States." Maya's carefully constructed composure crumbled. The grief she kept locked away, the grief that was the silent engine of her exhausting life, rose to the surface. She looked down at her scuffed black shoes. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They died. 7 years ago." The air went out of the room. Khalid's face, which had been softened by nostalgia, hardened with shock. Died? How they were not old. "A car accident," Maya said the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. "Outside of Salalah. They were driving back from a survey site. The police said their brakes failed on a mountain road." She didn't tell him the rest. She didn't tell him about the whispers from her parents, local colleagues, the hushed talk of it being no accident. She didn't tell him about the rival excavation teams, the corporate interests who wanted to survey the land for minerals, or the fact that her father had claimed to be on the verge of a discovery that would rewrite the history books. Those were dangerous, unsubstantiated grief fantasies she kept buried deep. Khalid was silent for a long time, processing the information. He walked back to the window, his posture now heavy with a sorrow that seemed to mirror her own. "I am so sorry," he said, and the words were not a polite platitude. They were steeped in genuine regret. "My father passed away 2 years ago. I know something of this loss. He spoke of your parents, often even after they finished their work at the site. He would have been devastated to hear this." He turned back to face her, his expression one of profound solemnity. "And you, their daughter, are working here." He gestured vaguely, indicating the restaurant beyond the door. "Why with their legacy? Their publications? Legacies don't pay rent in New York." "Sheikh Al-Jamil." Maya said, a flicker of her earlier defensiveness returning. "Or medical bills?" "Medical bills?" he asked, his focus sharpening. "My brother Leo. He was in the car with them. He survived, but he was badly injured. He's better now, mostly. But he needs ongoing therapy and he's in college. Everything they left was tied up in research grants and academic trusts. There wasn't much else. So I work. I work here, and I take online classes when I can." She laid her life bare with a kind of weary defiance. This was her reality, a world away from his. Khalid stared at her, and in his eyes she saw an emotion she couldn't quite name. It was more than pity. It was a complex mixture of guilt, responsibility, and something else, a sense of cosmic, unbelievable coincidence. The daughter of the two people his own father had admired so deeply was serving him water in a restaurant he had been about to destroy. The universe, it seemed, had a flair for the dramatic. The anger he had felt earlier that evening now seemed pathetic, a childish tantrum born of stress. The business deal that had soured the one concerning land development rights near the Omani border, the very same region her parents had dedicated their lives to, now felt profoundly insignificant compared to the story standing before him. He had walked into Ethelgard a furious billionaire. He was now simply the son of his father, standing before the daughter of his father's friends. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he couldn't just walk away. A heavy silence settled in the small office, thick with the ghosts of the past. For Maya, it was the ghosts of her brilliant, vibrant parents. For Khalid, it was the ghost of his formidable father, a man whose approval he still sought even from beyond the grave. The deal I was fighting for tonight. Khalid began, his voice low and contemplative, as if he were piecing together a complex puzzle. The reason for my unforgivable behavior. It's a large-scale sustainable energy project. Solar fields. The proposed location is in the Dhofar Governorate, near the border, not far from Shissa. Maya looked up, her eyes wide. That's where they were working when they died. I know, Khalid said grimly. That land is considered barren by the engineers, but a local heritage society has been filing injunctions claiming it is a site of significant undiscovered archaeological importance. They cite the work of two Westerners from years ago as their primary evidence. He looked directly at her. They cite the work of Doctors Alan Williams and Evelyn Reed. The room seemed to tilt. Maya sank into one of the uncomfortable office chairs, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Her parents' work, the passion that had consumed their lives and ultimately led to their deaths, was the very thing causing this $30 billion man a headache tonight. The irony was so bitter, it was almost comical. My partners are pressuring me to crush the opposition, Khalid continued, pacing the small room. To use our influence to lobby the government to declare the claims baseless and move on. They see it as a nuisance, a delay costing us millions per day. When the negotiations stalled this afternoon, I saw it as a failure to uphold my father's legacy of progress and innovation. He stopped in front of her, his expression etched with a newfound conflict. But now I see it differently. My father championed progress, yes, but he revered our history. He funded your parents' work because he believed that history was priceless. He would never have allowed it to be bulldozed for a solar farm, no matter how profitable. He ran a hand over his face, the gesture of a man utterly exhausted by the weight of his own world. In my anger, I almost betrayed the very principles he held most dear. I was about to dishonor him, and to dishonor the memory of your parents. He looked at Maya, and for the first time, she saw not a sheikh or a tycoon, but a man burdened by duty. A son trying to live up to a legend. In that they were not so different. She too was trying to honor her parents by caring for the one thing they had loved more than their work, her brother Leo. The proverb you quoted. Khalid said, his voice soft. The patient hunter gets the gazelle. It was one of my father's favorites. He used to say it to me when I was an impetuous boy, eager to rush into things. Hearing you say it, in that place, it felt as if his ghost had risen up to reprimand me. Maya finally found her voice. My father said it all the time. Usually when I was complaining about how long it took to brush the sand off a single piece of pottery. A small, sad smile touched her lips. It was the first time she had smiled all night. The smile seemed to break the last of the tension between them. Khalid pulled up the other chair sitting opposite her. The power dynamic of Billionaire and Waitress had completely evaporated. They were now just two people, linked by a shared history they hadn't known existed an hour ago. "Tell me about your brother Leo," he said, his tone gentle, inviting. And so she did. Maya spoke of Leo's sharp mind, his love for graphic design, and his quiet resilience. She described the grueling years of surgeries and physical therapy, and the fierce determination that had allowed him to walk again when doctors feared he might not. She spoke of his frustration at being a financial burden, and her own profound guilt that she couldn't give him the carefree college experience he deserved. As she talked, Khalid listened with an unwavering, intense focus. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply listened, his dark eyes reflecting a deep empathy. He was seeing the human cost of the tragedy, the ripple effects of that day on the mountain road 7 years ago. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Your parents gave their lives to preserving our history," he said, his voice filled with a quiet conviction. "My father dedicated his resources to helping them. It seems to me there is a debt that was never paid." He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "This is not about charity, Miss Williams. This is about honoring a legacy. My father's and yours. The Al Jamil Foundation has an extensive educational and healthcare grant program. I want you to send me every one of Leo's medical bills, past, present, and future, and the tuition statements. They will be taken care of, all of them." Maya stared at him, speechless. It was too much, too sudden. It was the answer to every desperate prayer she had whispered into her pillow at night. I can't accept that," she stammered. "It's too generous." "You mistake me," Khalid said firmly. "This is not generosity. It is a realignment of the universe. It is setting something right that has been wrong for 7 years. Consider it a posthumous grant in your parents' name. The work they did for my country, for our shared history, was invaluable. This is a fraction of its worth." He wasn't finished. His mind, the same one that navigated labyrinthine global markets, was now focused entirely on her. "And then there is you," he said. "A woman with a brilliant mind, fluent in a rare dialect, with a deep first-hand understanding of a region my company is currently struggling with. Working as a waitress." He shook his head. "It is a waste, a criminal waste of talent." He stood up, a new energy radiating from him. The businessman was back, but his purpose had changed. "I have a proposition for you, Maya Williams. A job. I am establishing a new position within Al Jamil Global, a cultural heritage liaison. Your role would be to work with my team on the Dhofar project. You would be the bridge between our engineers and the local communities, the heritage societies. You would ensure that we proceed with respect and caution. You would use your parents' research, your research, to guide us, to help us find a path that honors both the past and the future." He named a salary that made Maya's head spin. It was more money than she had ever imagined making in a decade, let alone a year. "You would report directly to me," he concluded. "Your first task would be to fly to Muscat next week to lead a new round of negotiations with the Heritage Society. You have the knowledge. You have the language. You are the only person in the world who can do this job." Maya's mind was reeling. An hour ago, her biggest concern was whether she'd be fired. Now she was being offered a new life, a chance to not just survive, but to thrive. A chance to step out of the shadows and continue her parents' work in a way she had never dreamed possible. But with the offer came a sliver of ice-cold fear, the whispers about her parents' death. No accident. Was it just grief, or was it a warning? Going back there, digging into the very land they had died for? Was she walking into the same danger? Khalid seemed to sense her hesitation. "I know this is sudden," he said, his voice softening once more. "But destiny does not often wait for a convenient time. Your parents were searching for something. Perhaps this is your chance to find it." Destiny. The word hung in the air, potent and terrifying. She looked at this man, this stranger, who was a link to her forgotten childhood, and saw the choice before her. She could stay here safe in her struggle, or she could step onto the path he was offering, a path that led back to the desert, back to the unanswered questions, back to the legacy of Alan and Evelyn Williams. Maya sat in stunned silence, the magnitude of Khalid's offer washing over her. It was a lifeline, a fantasy, a solution to every problem that kept her awake at night. But one detail snagged at the edge of her mind, a dark thread in a golden tapestry. "Why me?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You have teams of experts, negotiators, consultants. I'm a waitress with 2 years of online anthropology courses." Khalid's expression was unreadable. Because none of them are the daughter of Alan Williams and Evelyn Reed. None of them carry the legacy of their name. In that part of the world, lineage and reputation are a currency more valuable than oil. When you speak to the elders of the Heritage Society, you will not be an employee of Al Jamil Global. You will be the child of the 2 people they respected most. Your voice will carry a weight that $1 billion contract cannot buy. He paused, his gaze intensifying. And there is another reason. A more personal one. He walked back to the desk and picked up his phone, which had been lying face down. He tapped the screen a few times, and then turned it to face her. It was a photograph. An old, slightly faded photo of 2 men standing in the desert, squinting against the brilliant sun. They were both in their prime, one in a pristine white thobe, a younger version of the sheikh from Maya's childhood memory, and the other, a Western man in khaki, his arm slung casually over the other's shoulder in a gesture of easy friendship. The man in khaki was her father. "My father, Sheikh Rashid, and your father, Alan," Khalid said quietly. They were more than patron and recipient. They were friends. They would spend hours in my father's tent, drinking tea and debating history. My father believed your parents were on the verge of something monumental at Shisra, something that went beyond academic interest. Maya stared at the photo, a lump forming in her throat. She had never seen it before. "The night before your parents died," Khalid continued, his voice dropping, "my father received a call from yours. I was in the room. I remember it clearly. Your father was excited, agitated. He said he had found something. He said, 'Rashid, it's not just a city. It's a key. It changes everything we thought we knew.' He promised to call back the next day with details after they confirmed the location." Khalid put the phone down. That call never came. The next day, we received word of the accident. My father was devastated. He sent his own men to investigate. The official report was conclusive: brake failure, a tragic accident. He looked at Maya, his eyes dark with a long-held suspicion. My father never believed it. He thought the timing was too convenient. Your father had rivals not just in academia but in business. There have always been rumors of vast mineral deposits in that region. A UNESCO World Heritage designation, which your father's discovery would have guaranteed, would have made the land untouchable for commercial exploitation forever. Everything Maya had buried, every paranoid whisper she'd dismissed as a grief-stricken fantasy came rushing to the surface, validated by the son of the one man her father had trusted. It wasn't just an accident. The thought, cold and terrifying, solidified into a near certainty. Her parents had been silenced. My father's investigation went nowhere. Khalid admitted, his voice laced with frustration. The trail went cold, and then his own health began to fail. But he never let it go. On his deathbed, he made me promise that if the opportunity ever arose, I would protect their legacy. Your parents' legacy. He let out a long, weary sigh. When this land deal came across my desk, I saw only profit and progress. I had forgotten my promise. I was prepared to fight the Heritage Society, to dismiss the very legacy I had sworn to protect. Your presence here tonight, your words, they were a slap in the face from destiny itself, a reminder of my duty. Now Maya understood. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a reckoning. It was a chance for Khalid to fulfill a dying wish to correct a course he had been unknowingly straying from. And for her, it was something far more profound. It was a chance for justice, a chance to find out what her parents had really discovered, what they had died for. The fear she had felt moments before was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "The job," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I accept." A look of profound relief washed over Khalid's face. "Good," he said simply. "We have much work to do." He began to lay out the plan with the swift efficiency of a CEO. "My office will handle your resignation here. A car will pick you and your brother up tomorrow morning. I have a furnished corporate apartment in a secure building you will use for now. My personal physician will meet with Leo to review his case and ensure he has the absolute best care in the country. My foundation will handle all the financials. Your only focus now is the mission." He handed her a business card. It was thick black cardstock with his name and a single phone number embossed in silver. No title, no company name. "This is my private line. My executive assistant Zara will contact you in the morning with the details. She will arrange for your new credentials, passport updates, everything." He walked to the door and paused, turning back to her. The formidable sheikh was gone again, replaced by the man who had shared lemon candies in the desert. "Maya," he said, using her first name for the first time. "I cannot undo the past. I cannot bring them back. But I can give you the resources to find the truth and the platform to finish their work. What you do with it is up to you." With that, he was gone, leaving Maya alone in the sterile office that smelled of orchid and ozone. She looked down at the black card in her hand. It felt impossibly heavy, like the weight of a life she had never dared to imagine. Her world had been upended, her past recontextualized, her future rewritten in the span of a single chaotic hour. She thought of Leo, of his freedom from financial worry. She thought of her parents, of their passion and their sacrifice. And she thought of the desert, vast and silent, holding its secrets. She was no longer just Maya Williams, the struggling waitress. She was the daughter of Alan and Evelyn Reed, and she was going home. 3 weeks later, Maya stood, not in a stuffy restaurant uniform, but in a sharply tailored linen suit, the color of desert sand. She wasn't balancing trays of food. She was holding a leather-bound folio containing copies of her father's last known field notes. The air around her wasn't scented with truffle oil, but with jet fuel and the dry electric tang of the Omani air. She had just stepped off a G650, Khalid's private jet, onto the tarmac at a private airfield in Muscat. The transformation had been dizzyingly swift. True to his word, Khalid's machine had descended upon her life with breathtaking efficiency. One morning, she was serving coffee in Queens. The next, she and Leo were being settled into a stunning penthouse overlooking Central Park. Leo had been seen by a team of New York's top specialists who had already designed a new cutting-edge physical therapy regimen for him, all funded by the Al Jamil Foundation. For the first time in 7 years, Maya saw her brother's face, free from the constant low-level anxiety of being a burden. He was laughing again. That alone was worth everything. For her part, Maya had been immersed in a whirlwind of preparation. Briefings with Khalid's executive team, fittings with stylists, intensive refreshers on geopolitical policy in the region. But her most important work had been done late at night in her new apartment, poring over her parents' research, which Khalid had retrieved from a university archive where it had been languishing untouched. Reading their words, seeing their familiar handwriting, she felt a connection to them she thought had been severed forever. They were no longer just tragic figures from her past. They were her colleagues, her guides. Now, standing on the tarmac with Khalid by her side, the reality of her new life hit home. He was dressed not in a Western suit, but in a pristine white dishdasha and gutra, looking every bit the powerful Arabian sheikh. He looked more at ease here, more himself, than he ever had in New York. Nervous, he asked, his voice a low murmur beside her. Terrified, she admitted, clutching the folio tighter. And more alive than I've felt in years. He smiled a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. Good. That is how your parents felt every day they were here. It is the feeling of being on the edge of discovery. A black Maybach pulled up silently, and a driver in a crisp uniform opened the doors for them. As they drove through the outskirts of Muscat, a city of elegant white buildings nestled between jagged mountains and the turquoise sea, Khalid briefed her on their first meeting. We are meeting with Sheikh Hamad Al-Farsi, he explained. He is the head of the Omani Heritage Society and the primary elder of the tribe that holds ancestral rights over the land. He is an old man. He knew your parents well. He was the one who continued to file the injunctions all these years based on nothing more than his respect for your father's word. An hour later, they were in a traditional majlis, a spacious room with ornate carpets and cushions lining the walls. Sheikh Hamad was a man who seemed as ancient and timeless as the mountains outside. He had a kind, deeply wrinkled face and eyes that shone with a sharp intelligence. He greeted Khalid with formal respect, but when he turned to Maya, his expression softened. He took her hands in his own, his grip surprisingly strong. He spoke to her in the same local dialect she knew from her childhood. The daughter of the red-haired woman. He said, a sad smile touching his lips. You have your mother's eyes and your father's stubborn chin. We have waited a long time for you to come home. Tears pricked Maya's eyes. In that moment, the last of her fear dissolved, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. This was where she was meant to be. For the next 2 hours, she didn't just translate. She led the conversation. Guided by her father's notes and her own recovered memories, she spoke of the land not as a tract for development, but as a sacred text full of history. She pointed to specific rock formations, wadis and constellations her father had cross-referenced with ancient manuscripts. She explained his theory, the theory he'd never had a chance to prove that Shisar was not just a single city, but the central hub of a vast, interconnected network of smaller settlements and watchtowers, a web of civilization far more sophisticated than previously believed. The key he had mentioned to Khalid's father wasn't a place. It was a map hidden in the landscape itself. Khalid watched her silent and impressed. She was a natural. She commanded the room not with power, but with passion and knowledge. She was her parents' daughter in every sense of the word. By the end of the meeting, an agreement had been reached. Al Jamil Global would fund a new state-of-the-art archaeological survey of the entire region, led by Maya. The solar project would be redesigned, its footprint shifted to a less significant area, guided by the survey's findings. It was a perfect synthesis of past and future, of progress and preservation. It was the solution Khalid's father would have wanted. As they left the majlis walking under a sky ablaze with the violet and orange hues of a desert sunset, Khalid turned to her. "My father would be so proud today," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Of both of us." Maya looked out at the vast, silent landscape, a land of secrets and second chances. The rage that had brought them together in that New York restaurant felt like it had happened in another lifetime. It was a catalyst, a violent, improbable spark that had ignited a dormant legacy and forged an unlikely partnership. Her journey was just beginning. There were still truths to uncover about her parents' death, a mystery she was now uniquely positioned to investigate. But for the first time in 7 years, she wasn't running from her past. She was embracing it. She had found her purpose, not in the hushed halls of Ethelgard, but here, under the endless Arabian sky, following a map left for her by the people she loved. The patient hunter at last was on the trail of the gazelle. That single moment in a New York restaurant, a moment of fury met with an impossible response, didn't just change one woman's life, it changed the course of a multi-billion-dollar project and set in motion the unraveling of a 7-year-old mystery. It's a powerful reminder that our past is always with us, and the skills and stories we carry inside us can be the keys that unlock our true destiny. Maya's journey from a struggling waitress to a leader in her field shows that you never know when your hidden strengths will be called upon to change everything. If this story of unexpected connections, second chances, and the enduring power of legacy resonated with you, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share it with someone who appreciates a story where fate plays a mysterious hand. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for more incredible real-life stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What hidden skill do you possess that might surprise the world one day?